Thank you, Sarah, and welcome again, Susan. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. We're going to talk to Susan about New George's Theater, which is her theater company, and broaden that over the course of the conversation to what's going on in the theater world, and many things are going on, and kind of a view of where are things going and where do you think we'll be in a few years with all this. But I want to start by talking about New George's, and I'm going to give you a little information for folks who may not be familiar with the company, and I'm stealing from the website here. At New George's, we've now advanced the language, ambition, power, and ingenuity of confident theater makers who are women for 28 years. Our tendrils reach far and wide, and our artists, who've always challenged the prevailing narrative, permeate every corner of the culture. Today, the women and gender nonconforming artists we serve are exploding what theater can look and feel like. The most adventurous among them intend to change the process, the model, and the world with their thoughtful, wry, thoroughly original work. When we say who are women, we mean women of all kinds and transgender nonconforming artists. And there's another great line: we launch and sustain artists who are women of assertive imagination, individually, as collaborators, and as community, and advance their exuberantly theatrical new plays. And just a few statistics of what New George's has done in 28 years. 48 world or New York premiered of new American plays, 21 new play commissions, 18 of which were produced, 11 festivals of New York, 260 affiliated artists that include playwrights, directors, actors, and designers. 72 artists serve in their core programs annually, countless new works that have been developed in the room, and Susan may talk a little about the structure of the room and her other development works at the company. And the honors for New George's, including lots of great press that I always enjoy reading, include 3 Obie Awards, the Lilly Award, the National Theater Conference Outstanding Theater Award, Susan Smith Blackburn Prize, and the Kesselring Prize. It's really an impressive achievement. And it's great to have seen it in its early days and see what's going on and see where it's going. Susan is the co-founding artistic director of the group, and has been there since the beginning. So with that little brief narrative, Susan, is there anything else you would add to help the audience get a feel for what New George's is all about?
I thought that was very thorough.
It was written by your folks, of course.
I do everything.
Oh, okay.
Not everything anymore, no. So, it's good. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So you formed the group in 1992, and so, a major achievement there. You were what, 7? So can you...
You know exactly how old I am.
So can you talk a little bit about the downtown theater scene at the time and what your inspiration was for deciding to found a new theater company?
Well, I really had no idea it would become really a theater company. I was an actor. I just wanted to be in plays. I had founded a theater company. I went to drama school at Circle in the Square for 2 years, and then with a few friends, we put on a play that turned into the kind of a season. We what's that called when you you get all the documents? We became 501c3 instantaneously for reasons I still don't understand. And then those people got kind of bored with it. And it was just really hard to find plays, even for me and the other woman who was in the company. Like, what play should we be in? How can we find a play that has good parts for both of us? And then the company sort of dissolved. And then I was in commercial class, which is where you learn how to be in commercials. I was terrible. I was not in any commercials and never went to an audition, but everyone else in the class did. And they were complaining all the time about how they just got called in to be these like bimbos or young moms, but maybe they were already too old to be a young mom. And it was weird. Did I mention there were only women in this commercial class? And it was the fall of 1991, and the Anita Hill thing was happening. And it just was this really fervent time. And so I thought, well, wow, this theater company that I've already founded, that I have, that is no longer really exists, could be somehow about women. So I invited the person who seemed most interesting to me and most angry in that group out to lunch, and was like, I have this theater company, maybe it should be about women. Do you want to be a part of it? And she was like, well, invite me to a meeting. And I was like, there is no meeting, there's just me. So she was like, well, okay. And then we did a production of Vinegar Tom, a Carol Churchill play that I knew really well already. And then we couldn't find another play to do. So I thought, well, there must be new writers who need productions or whatever else they need. We have to find, who are like us, who are angry. We have to find them. And maybe they could write plays that we would be in, because we would be interested in like the same things. And so that is how we started looking for new playwrights. But the thing is that, it was before the internet. So I thought, you'd meet one woman playwright, and I did. I spoke to like Harold Wolpert, who Jay and I mutually know from college, who was working at Manhattan Theater Club. And I was like, do you know any women playwrights? And he did. I introduced me to 2 people. But I didn't know how to. I thought they would know each other, and then I could ask the one woman playwright, do you know another one? And it would, and so on and so on. But none of that happened. That community did not exist, or if it did, it was within organizations that already existed, organizations that had a lot of gatekeeping, where it was very difficult to get involved. So I was like, well, we have to be that network, and we have to be that community. And by doing work, we'll meet more people. And sure enough, that's what happened. So, yay. Happenstance. I mean, when I talk to people now, they have a plan, and this had no plan. It was 100% serendipity.
How it is,
all of which is to say, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think what you discovered was, you thought you could start here, and you really had to start back here. You had to start back with developing the material, because there wasn't a cohesive. There was probably lots of little creative people that knocking on doors of various companies they couldn't get into.
Yeah.
And this is, find, like you said, that community, almost like a little collegial environment of developmental.
Yeah, and I didn't know what that was, and I didn't really know what people needed. And at first we just produced a lot of plays, and it was really hard. And then finally I got a bunch of people I liked together and said, well, what do you need? What do you actually need? And they were like, space. We need to like stand up. It's plays. We need, plays require standing up, but the plays I didn't understand that some plays that people sent me that I liked weren't ready for production. So I was like, what do I do with these people? I really like them. They're super cool, and their play just isn't ready. All I do is produce. And then I learned that there was this thing called play development, which now seems hilarious because, there's play development. And we founded our workspace, The Room, to be the hub of what was going to go on, and stop producing so much, started developing more, even though we kept producing.
That's good. So you have multiple arms. How do you feel New York figured into the plan? You obviously were in New York. Do you think it was the place it had to happen? Or could New Georgians have bloomed elsewhere? Obviously, you don't know every city, but do you think, how integral is New York to the whole?
It's such an interesting question, because I think that the quantity and kind of like robust, I hate that word because it's overused now, but the robustness of the people who are there wanting to do this thing is pretty singular. At the same time, I harbor a lot of jealousy for people who actually are making work in a community where they feel like they're serving a community. I serve a glut of disparate people. I mean, it's just, we're making the work, but it's less about the audience. It's more about how to push the work forward, because there's just so much happening here. It's very hard to break through that. At the same time, this is where I already lived. It's the only place I've ever wanted to live. I'm from the Bay Area. I'm from Palo Alto. So I only really ever, no offense, wanted, but I only ever wanted to live in New York City. So that was where we were. And it feels very I mean, it's very difficult, but at the same time, there's a lot of support. And at the time that I was starting the company, there was beginning to be a recognition of what small theaters were doing and that they were important. And there was a lot of support through our service organization and in other ways. The very first, like I was one of the recipients of the very first grant for teeny theaters that came through our service organization. So it was kind of right place, right time-ish, maybe.
Okay. And yeah, I think you kind of addressed this, that there's a lot of people with talent that there's the process you need to get to before you have plays ready to really be on their feet. And there isn't, once you get out of whatever university theater program, there isn't a thing. And it seems like you're providing a unique kind of thing to allow people to do that path and do that development and training and put a toe in the water and learn and grow to get to that point of hopefully being able to stage commercially viable plays at your venues and beyond, which is, it seems like, this is my next question, I think we've kind of talked about it. My question was how your vision has changed, but it sounds like that kind of crystallizes it. You're not just about, hey, let's put on some plays that I can be in, but.
That has changed. But that's how most people, start. I think that's people's usual tone. I mean, I didn't expect to be, an avant-gardist. I was going to be in musicals like you. That's what I was going to do. So these things happen. No, but it has definitely evolved over the years in many other ways. And I think that, this idea of a community, I'm actually very shy, and it was really hard for me to knock on doors as a terrible actor and try to get things going. It actually was easier for me to produce an entire play by myself and strike the set by myself than to try to get jobs. And so I feel like I felt that in other people too. And so, I like to be like, we say yes when everyone else is saying no, especially if you're in our aesthetic world and you're really someone who I feel that you're, it's a very specific culture and a very specific vibe, I think, that we work in terms of process, especially process and flexibility and all these other things that we're interested in. And so creating that community was really the community I needed. So I feel like even though I'm no longer in all the plays, the impulse itself has been pretty selfish because I get to hang with all these cool people all the time, and then they get to meet each other, and then I get to see how their collaborations move forward. And that's very satisfying because it really takes a lot of people to make a vision go forward. And I think that it's really hard to be a playwright, and it's really hard to be a director. And so creating these combinations and kind of creating this little, I often thought of it, I don't like to think about the women thing, and I kind of put it in a box over here because we just want to produce the plays. But it is sort of like, in women's colleges where you kind of have a place where there's like one extra thing you're not competing with or trying to be better at math than or whatever missing, so that maybe, we can present you and advance you in a different kind of way.
Just focus on the work, on the art, right? So there's obviously a lot of elements that have, this is not on my list. It's a new question for you. I just thought of, there's a lot of elements to it. Resources, finding people, finding space, finding money. What's in the last 28 years, what's gotten easier, what's gotten harder for those things that you have to put together to make New Georges happen?
It's generally gotten easier because now I have people to help me. Right. And people who are really good at their jobs and know how to do things that I was clearly doing wrong with budgets and things. And I started to hire people, so it wasn't just me pushing a tire across 42nd Street, which it was for a lot of years. So that has gotten easier, and the internet made things easier because I wasn't folding like 100 little notices to my affiliated artists and then putting them in the mail. That's easier. And raising money, raising money still is a challenge. The coming time will be a challenge. So it generally has gotten easier, but some things have become more complicated because being scrappy, there was adventure to that we kind of sort of miss.
Yeah, can you imagine? So
Not that much.
I talked about a few of the awards and achievements. What in general makes you proudest about New George's and where it's come from and where it is?
I think just still being here. It's pretty. It's still being here, and I'm really proud of our artists and having been there, especially working with a lot of early career artists and having them be extremely successful, many of them now, or in many different fields. Some of them are Heidi Schreck, who's What the Constitution Means to Me, is now on Amazon Prime, and it's directed by Mariel Heller, whose first show in New York I also produced. So that's amazing. They didn't meet through me, but look at them. They're out there doing that thing together. And some of the plays, and I think the influence of the plays, because a lot of the plays that we do are not plays that are done a lot in our nation or elsewhere, but they are read by the younger playwrights, and they're influenced them. So now when I read playwrights, I know they've read Jenny Schwartz's God's Ear. I know they've read God's Ear. I know God's Ear has been, is the blood in their veins because of the way that they write. So it's now that it's like generations on, it's really exciting and important. And I know that we've impacted also, just there are more women doing this, and a lot of them will write for TV now and blah, 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 blah. And so they have even more influence. So it's great. Those things, I feel very proud. Sometimes I feel depressed and like, my people, no one's doing that, I didn't produce this. But, generally people are pretty, and they come back and people are, it's like sort of this, I sort of had to deal with it being like, no, we're the like artistic home, but we're not necessarily going to be the springboard and the launch pad in a lot of ways. But it's not usually the one that's like the most evident. Right,
that gets the thing that's going to be the big commercially viable, visible.
Well, nothing's ever commercially viable, but okay. But yes, but the word that gets produced, in a lot of places, that's the the wolf.
Not the big bucks. Okay, we understand. That's what we meant. But yeah, and on the flip side, what's been the hardest part? What's been the hardest challenge for you? Either that still is, or that you feel like you made it over that mountaintop?
Again, I think it's sort of, it depends on how much you like to have additional life. Because it just, for the first, until we had a managing director 10 years ago, or a little bit before then, it just was all consuming. It's an all consuming job. It's not something that you do. Just, it used to be that in order to use our rehearsal space, you'd have to get a key from me at all hours of the day or night in my apartment that didn't have a doorbell, because I lived on top of this, my husband's parents' commercial business. So I would be answering the phone all times and running out onto the cold street to hand someone a key so they could get into the rehearsal room. That was crazy. So I feel like getting through that amount of time and finally having some boundaries is good.
But for those who don't know, you did happen to manage to raise 2 kids along the way.
Oh, yes.
Somehow.
Arguably.
They got the key to the rehearsal space.
Arguably.
That's great. You mentioned the phrase, I quoted your phrase, exuberantly theatrical, which I think is just a great description. Can you talk a little bit more about what that means and how it fits in with the vision and drawing in playwrights to that?
Yeah. I'm really interested in what I often call also a highly theatrical aesthetic, and which is a little sometimes hard to define. It's kind of one of those, when you see it things, but there's never going to be a sofa is the upshot. Like I'm really interested in juxtaposition and surrealism and language, really toothy language, and things that don't go but up and up and up and up and up. Not really well-made plays, but they're well-made in a different way. And I don't know why that is. And some of it I think comes from musicals. It's heightened, you know, even if something does, we have done things that sort of go in more in a straight line, but they're always heightened in some way. They have to happen in a theater. They often, you know, it might be time that's messed with. Usually it is sort of the structurally innovative, that the plays are structurally innovative. I really like a play where I go to it, I'm not quite sure, like for the first hour, I have no idea what's going on. I'm like, I don't know, you know, like, I don't know what's going on. And then all of a sudden, boom, I'm sobbing. Because there's something in the emotional content of whatever was going on that I wasn't able to put my mind to, that then has emerged in a way that has this tremendous beauty because it mimics some sort of experience that you do relate to. And often that's because the language is complex. Often it's because there's like a different kind of design or audience relationship. You sort of don't know where it's going. When I read a play, and certainly when I go to a play, but when I read a play because I'm looking for us, I want to be surprised. I just want to see something I've never seen before. So often what I'm producing are things that I'm interested in as a producer because they have like some sort of peculiar theatricality, because like we did a show with a lot of video in 2000. And no one was really doing that. It had video on the set, and it had video on a TV. So it had it in a whole bunch of different ways. And it was essential to the storytelling. And it wasn't like something people had seen before. And it was in this big barn-like space. And that was just really exciting. And we've used that a lot. And we've done things where, you know, I just want to do something different that I haven't done before. And I'm really, really interested in varied ways of storytelling. Like, how does this tell a story? Like, if this is, like we did this play by Carson Kreitzer called Self-Defense a bunch of years ago, and I always would have people read it because it's pretty straightforward in terms of like the language and the scenes, but the way the scenes are constructed, it's basically the story of Aileen Wuornos, the serial killer. And the way they're constructed is essential to getting a different kind of understanding than you would if it was like this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. How and why is she choosing those scenes to go together in this way so that your understanding kind of goes back and forth? And that is and magic, like magic, by which I mean sort of like anything can happen, right? Anything can happen in the theater, and you believe it if you let people in. That's what I like. I mean, God's Ear that I mentioned earlier, I don't know if people have read it. It's worth reading. I love it. But it is it's a play about a family whose child has died in a horrible accident, and they lose language. They lose the ability to communicate with each other, and so the language. But the first thing you learn is about this death, and you get it through the scene. So you're already like, no one didn't get this play that I was kind of worried about it because of the language. There's like a 4-page monologue which is only idioms and sayings. It's incredible. Anyway, but everyone got it because they already knew it was happening, because at the very beginning you knew that there was this emotional component. And so as you followed around and watched this thing fall apart and watched the Tooth Fairy come in and G.I. Joe and it's snow and all these crazy things happen, I feel like you cared already. So the play can go anywhere. And I think that that's something I've learned about guiding this kind of play and becoming a dramaturg, and especially a production dramaturg for this kind of play, which is often less about the text and more about the moments, which I think interest me more sort of than the text, is that, you know, if you find a way to let people in, the play isn't weird anymore.
That's really interesting. It kind of sounds like a process of getting to some kind of emotional truth, maybe through a surprising way that maybe comes up on you as an audience member. Your brain's processing it maybe in a way, and all of a sudden you get it. You mentioned that, but also that willingness to, you don't want the dramaturg to say, people aren't going to know what's going on. They're not going to understand that. You've got to change it. It's okay to have that ambiguity or that questioning. The audience is engaging their brain, it's willing their hearts to try and get to what's there. And the result is more intense. Is that all along the way, it does need to entertain, it keeps you engaged, but part of it might be what the hell's going on here, but that's okay. As long as as long as at its core, it's going to be, the story is going to have a way of imparting itself to you, which is.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, and it may be.
I mean, but it does. But that's been the interesting adventure is trying to figure out how to put those and trust. It just takes so much trust. It's scary.
Yeah. Well, it also kind of speaks to what you were talking earlier of having places where you can workshop these, work on them in readings and, start to get some feedback, because you've got to see, is what the playwright's after getting to an audience on some level, and sometimes it might take a tweak to get where it needs to be. And that's, we were talking a little before the show started about that, which is that theater art is not like, oh, I'm going to write a novel, I'm going to sit down and write it, I can do it in my own room. You've got to bring these elements together to see if it works. And so it's a much bigger, more collaborative.
And that's why, we realized at some point, I mean, most of when you talk about evolution, it's been about looking back and saying, oh, this is what we do. Okay. As opposed to being forward, this is what we're going to do. And realizing that the kind of plays we were doing, playwright collaboration is so especially, playwright director, pardon me, is so important, because the director and playwright need to understand the vision so clearly, so coherently, that they are pushing the same thing forward. So we sort of changed all of our programs around about 12 years ago to be all about playwright director collaboration, based in collaboration, coming out with new collaborations, find new collaborations, because that's, with new plays especially, that's the key element that's gonna crack it open.
Well, it sounds like also being able to produce or help launch more directors into the world that have this understanding. So
absolutely. Weird play directors. Weird play women directors.
We'd love more. Send them our way.
Oh, so, okay.
Obviously, you talked about the group being a little born out of your anger, but being about amplifying voices that weren't getting heard. And are there lessons learned that you think can help your company and other companies on the path to inclusiveness today?
Again, I think that I think the lessons are often about just openness. I think a lot of the conversations that I'm in are about gatekeeping and what's wrong with gatekeeping and what has to change and what are the barriers to entry. And at this point, I do feel like there are a lot of people on the lookout for plays that come from a variety of perspectives. A lot of them don't make it to, quote unquote, main stages. But our company, I feel so lucky because our company's really teeny. We don't have any money, but it's really about relationships, and it's really about people and knowing people and getting to know people, spending time with people, so that you feel ready to produce their work and that you have understanding of their work. And that's also the fun part. So I mean, from my perspective, staying open, meeting a lot of people, and really learning to read plays that may come to you in a variety of forms is sort of the way into that. And I think because we originally were founded to support underrepresented communities, we've always considered ourselves to be very open, and we've always been, well, not the most diverse, but certainly more than a lot of our peer organizations. And you just only hope that grows because people have a good experience with us. I also think that, the culture and the way, I think that a lot of the conversation now is about sort of feeling like, well, I was in this predominantly white institution, and they produced my play, but I wasn't feeling that good about it because of all of these things. And I hope that because of the hands-on ways that we work and the closeness with which we produce things in terms of, well, what do you want as the artist, and the way we ask artists all the time what they need, that we're getting answers that help us to support artists in ways they want to come back and in ways that will advance them and help them further along in their careers the way we intend to. I don't know if those are useful lessons, but that's kind of our.
I think there's a lot of self-examination, re-examination going on with theater companies across the country. And New Georgia's, you have a really interesting whole page about your kind of action plan to be on anti-racism and changing processes. And you called out for a series of action labs, you've called them, which I think is a great name. You're great at your names there. Exuberantly Theatrical Action Labs that are going to dive into the historical, economic, and creative forces in the theater. And I think those are some great kind of headings. Can you tell us a little bit more about your action labs and where?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, as people may know, obviously everyone has been re-examining structural racism in their organizations ever since May. There also has been this We See You White American Theater list of demands that has gone around and been publicized, and that many theaters are finding ways to hew to. When we read the We See You White American Theater demands, because we're a small company, a lot of them are about structures that we don't have. We don't have a marketing department. They talk about they didn't, whatever. So we were like, well, how do we take this and embrace this and make it? And there are obviously things that we can do. We can stop having 10 out of 12 technical rehearsals, et cetera, which we don't usually have anyway. But we're like, well, how can we dig deeper into what our extremely specific structures are? And so we had already, even before We See What came out, we had convened a group of initially white artists who were in our community, primarily because we saw that they had been doing a lot of other things, were in a lot of other anti-racist groups and organizations. And Janie, our managing director, and I also been through PSAP training with a lot of theater people, and we're also involved in a bunch of other groups. To gather and talk about what we should do, what responsibility we should take on. So that group has been meeting since August, and ultimately we put together, We See What, we had to give them a deadline for when we were going to post something. So that was October 1st. So we kind of had a deadline for ourselves, which was great. The action labs are sort of a distillation of what those conversations were, with 6 or 7 of our artists, directors, and playwrights. And that's been, those conversations have been really fruitful. Now we're figuring out how to actually do it. We presented that so we have all these affiliated artists. Basically, if I read your play or meet you because you're a director or a composer or whatever, or you work with us and you're an actor or designer, I'll be like, we need to keep working together. You are rad. So that's our affiliated artist community, and we send them emails. So we sent them this, and we said, this is what's going to happen, but there's going to be an invitation. So right now, in fact, we had a meeting just today to talk about this invitation. We're a 3-person staff. We're 2 white women and a Black woman. So we've been me and Janie have been sort of doing the heavy lift, and now we're bringing in Deidre, who's our 3rd staff member, and talking about ways to bring more BIPOC people into the process, or bringing any, because we've been very, cautious about that, wanting to be sure this is going to feel like a process that's productive. And Deidre was like, of course, let's get going. And so now we're just at the very beginning of figuring out how do we actually, because every time we have a meeting now with the initial group, instead of being like, yes, this is how we're going to do this action lab, they're like, but I have a whole other idea for another thing we should do. And then I'm like, oh no, how do we even sort this out? So I hope that it will be exciting. I hope that it will engage our community so much that they feel like they're a part of this change that has to happen. I'm curious myself to find out what we discover. I'm especially interested in these economic questions, which don't come from me. They come from people who've been thinking really deeply about this stuff already. It's super important. It's something we already think about because of the makeup of our staff every day. This is something we're talking about. And yeah, it's great.
Yeah,
do it.
We're on it. We're on it. I wanted to talk about that, the last one, the economic. I was really struck by that because I think that's a big component for small theaters. If you're a big commercial enterprise with lots of bucks, you have the resources you're also kind of behind this. Yeah, you can afford to hire and pay and restructure. And you're small, you don't have all that. So you mentioned low road capitalism as a way to kind of remove some barriers.
What is road? Are you going to ask me what that is? Because it wasn't my idea. And I don't.
Okay. I didn't mean it was on my list. Anyway.
Well,
suffice-
this director named Kate Bergstrom, a Californian, is really into it, and I'm really excited to learn more about it. But we've also been talking about this sort of barter idea and just the economics of what we do. This is the worst thing. Here's my answer. Everything, and it's also sort of a New York thing, everything has gotten very expensive. And the unions, the actors union in particular, I know that this is an issue in the Bay Area as well, has shifted a lot of their rules. And that has been extremely difficult for us. For years, we produced on the showcase code, then we moved to contract, but we can't go back and forth. We can't really, our contract went up because we did a remount of a show in the Broadway box, which cost more, and then you can never go back. So we're actually paying beyond the ability, whatever. It's such a long, boring story. But it's really prohibiting our doing as much. Like in 2019, we produced one show that was supposed to be a teeny show, but it had to be a big show because it was, 7 actors on equity contract. So it's become very, very complicated producing in the first place. So we are just really interested in, in figuring out ways to figure out how to make work, because we like to be nimble and we like to just kind of, so that's been extremely difficult. And there are other expenses that have gone up too. When the real estate prices in New York City go up, then that guy who used to build your set at the shop out in Brooklyn is no longer there. So everything has really exploded, and it's very, very hard to produce.
Yeah, I that is a big element for us too.
Low road or high road, yeah.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you got shifted onto a higher cost road anyway, based on the structure. And
he did, and nothing is, the minimum wage goes up in New York State, but our state funding does not go up, and now it's really going to not go up. So
yeah, well, we'll continue to struggle with here it's the AB5 law and being able to pay stipends to people and having to make people employees, and it will continue to be a challenge for us, particularly. But
yeah, it's really hard.
As you look at, we've talked about some of these, but look ahead, where do you see the theater scene post-COVID? Hopefully next year, maybe mid-late next year.
I don't know. I mean, we've really been focusing on just making sure our artists are okay with community events, kind of open Zooms, directors events, introducing people to people, giving lunch money, teeny weeny grants, just so people, we just want to make sure people are okay. So assuming people make it through, it's, I hope that we can open next year. I hope that a lot of theaters won't have collapsed by then and not made it through till next year. I think we're going to be okay. We were supposed to do 2 shows in the fall, this fall, and we pushed them all the way back to next October and November. So we may push it back farther. So we kind of are a little bit like, we don't have any big things right now, except for our spaces, which I worry about. And we've had some support. So I don't know. It's really sad. I mean, it's just so sad. And especially when you're thinking about, it's sad for about new plays and plays that are not being produced, that were supposed to be produced, and losing a season or 2 when most theaters have 1 or 2 slots for a new play, unless they're new play theater, which is mostly in New York, is a lot of work. It's a lot of work, a lot of people's plays that aren't going to be seen. And that is hard. I mean, usually I'm talking to like 26-year-old playwrights who are really sad that their play isn't going to be produced. I'm kind of like, you have your whole life, but my plays are no, it's just really sad. That's just lost work, and not just lost work hours, but like literally lost work, canonical work that.
Yeah, and there are some people that are hanging on, a little tenuously to being this kind of an artist, that are like, they might like go and say, okay, I can't wait, I'm going to go take that desk job and do whatever, which is tough. Absolutely. You hate to think of losing voices that need to be heard, but
It's really, really sad. So hopefully if we come back, we could do a lot of work if we can afford it.
Yeah. I think certainly about coming out of the whole inclusivity movement, like yourselves, I think there will be people who want to make their new companies and find a place and find a niche and make their voices heard. Starting, what advice do you have for today's new theater founders, the eager voices listening in, the ears listening in that want to follow?
Make your own model. And, I sort of grew up, was so fortunate, again, through our service organization, Art New York, really encouraged not to use bigger theaters as a model administratively or in terms of process. And that has been great. We now have a whole generation, and then another generation of theater companies that, are really nimble and didn't ever expect to institutionalize in the way that the generation before us did institutionalize. And so I really, really, you don't know what's going to happen, and the work is the really important thing. So staying nimble, not thinking you have to do it in any sort of way, not thinking you have to do it at any sort of speed. I think one of the amazing things about the moment and also the anti-racist work is about taking your time and giving yourself some time to rest. I didn't,
You didn't rest, but yeah.
People who are younger, they seem to want to do that. I don't know. It's crazy. I did eventually. But you may not be able to. And kind of cutting yourself a break. And hopefully that will allow for more risk-taking in the work itself, so that we can have really interesting, cool work. I think that there's so many people. I mean, it's a golden age for American playwriting. So many programs have popped up. I mean, that's the other thing that's so different. And the ingenuity of people who are writing, I can't even. I mean, it's incredible. This is why I'm still doing my job, is because I'm so excited about the people I meet, the voices, the incredible ambition theatrically, and ability to do it. And people they're all founding a theater company. Because they're self-producing. They're making their own plays, at least here. Why is this a golden age for playwriting? Because I think people are really, so there are a lot of new playwriting programs across the country. More universities have them. I'm thinking a lot about the Brooklyn College program, which has produced some really weird plays that I love, and was run by Aaron Courtney, who's now at Northwestern, and Mac Wellman, who's the avant-garde king of everything. And there are more and more. The Brown program is great. UCSD, it used to be like there was Yale and NYU, and now there's so many, and I'm probably not naming them, and then people mad at me. But so you Carnegie Mellon. Anyway, so you don't necessarily want that many playwrights in your world, because the world can't handle that many playwrights. Honestly, there's not that much opportunity, but they are a lot of women and BIPOC people, and they're incredible and ingenious. And a lot of them are makers. They're not playwrights. They're makers. Haruna Lee, one of our artists, is a maker, and look them up. They make crazy things beautifully. And Haruna was an actor in one of our shows originally, and I got to know them as an actor. So so they do everything. Like, no one's just like, I'm a playwright, I'm a director. People are doing everything. They understand the theatrical moment. They understand how to make theater as much as they understand how to write something on a page. And to me, and there are also many more traditional writers, but to me, that is like, it's so exciting. It's so exciting to see an original voice, and just like crazy ideas, and what are you writing about? And today we read in our residency program a play where the golem was a lump of clay, and then the clay morphed into something, and then there was a really long scene with ants, and the ants were the moral center of the play, and the queen ant kept saying, empathy, empathy, And then the other ants had to figure out what that was. And then there was a book club with a cockroach. I'm just all over that. It was hilarious. It was meaningful. It was totally understandable. And why not? It's the theater. You can do whatever you want. You can burst out into song. There were a lot of songs in this play. So do I. It's very nascent. I'll keep you posted. But it's amazing. And that playwright, Lisa Clare, also has this King Kong show, which is a spectacle and unbelievable. It's just, you're like, okay. So it's very, very exciting. And I'm not the only one person who thinks it's golden. It is. And a lot of it comes because people are not waiting around to be produced. Because if you're like, I'm going to write my really weird play, and maybe Playwrights Horizons will produce it, it might take a long time. But if you produce all of your plays, then yourself, and they come to see it, then you're going to have a leg up. So I think that's exciting too. And since I can't produce everybody anymore, it's really important to those people. But we do, one of our biggest productions that keeps growing is a supported productions program where we produce, where we provide an institutional platform to artists we love who are producing themselves. So we do get to have our hand in something and hopefully help them along.
Awesome.
A long answer, sorry.
No, that was a great answer. And it was a great kind of way to wind up. I will open it up to questions if people have questions. The only other thing I want to make sure for those whose interest is piqued, New Georges has a play that is actually opening tomorrow. It's a remounting of a show called Karen, I Said, online, and I'll let Susan talk briefly about it. We will give you a link to get a ticket, but it's all alum, all New Georges alum who are involved, right? Directing, writing, performing.
Yeah, and current people. It's called Karen, I Said, and it's a Zoom theatrical, and it's written and performed by a woman named Eliza Bent, who we've worked with probably since 2012 or so. And in various capacities, we've supported a couple of her plays. She's acted in plays. She acted in a play we did last year called Leap in the Net Will Appear by Hannah Porter, which was directed by Tara Ahmadinejad, who also is directing this. And Tara has a lot of VR experience and has made, and it's just super fun. It's super goofy, it's super fun. It pokes fun in a way that is pretty smart, because at first I was like, you want to go there? That is pretty smart at wokeness and the Karen idea. And Eliza is hilarious, and it's just really, and it's 45 minutes long, and it's on Zoom, and you get to be seen on Zoom. And there are 5 performances tomorrow through Monday. So and we're co-producing it with Eliza's company and a lot of other people. What is that mass of strange objects filling your shelves? That's an old typewriter, and it's got books on top, including Free for All, the Joe Papp, the greatest theater story ever told. I highly recommend it. Do all the plays you're producing get published? A lot of the plays we produce do get published. Yes, but not all, sadly. But many of them have. It's very exciting. The name of the theater is for George Sand and George Eliot, which is it. I'm just reading the questions now.
That's okay.
George
You
Sand.
don't need me. I'll love.
They were women who wrote under men's names. It's not an ideal metaphor, but we're stuck with it.
Hey, actually, Susan, I'm sorry, I missed that little bit. It's Sarah again. You said that it was where did the name of the theater come from? I missed what you just said.
Oh, it's for George Sand and George Eliot.
Oh, okay.
Of course, were writers who wrote under men's names.
I just finished reading Middlemarch, which is George Eliot.
I've never read it. I got bored.
You'll get bored. It's wonderful. You know what? I'll re-record it into something exuberantly theatrical.
Okay.
I'll throw in some ants and cockroaches. You'll eat it.
People have tried. They've sent me things like that. And then I'm like.
Okay. Are there other questions? Are people still catching up on Susan's words from 8 minutes ago? I understand. There's a lot of flow through there.
I know.
Susan, when you used to have to pay for long distance phone calls, Susan would get her money's worth because she got more words in per minute. So.
My role in Wonderful Town, prepare me for your role with New Georges. Well, I met you all. No, but seriously, this is really interesting. You know, Jay and I went to Penn together-ish, and at Penn, you know, it was not like Yale where there are many theater groups and it's very professional. At Penn, you had to produce your own plays, and you know, that's how I learned to do all this, was like carrying flats down the main walk of the university to the place that was so far away from the theater where you had to bring the flats after you were done with them. So we, and almost everyone we went to Penn with became a producer, who's still in the theater became a producer. Not Bob. Bob was a producer. Yeah, just ask the question. Became a producer, which I find, which I find really, really interesting. And I tell people all the time, because we made it ourselves. We made the shows ourselves. So I never intended to be a producer, but I knew how to do it. So it did prepare me. Also, you know, wonderful town. I was in my freshman year in college, and I had also been in high school, but I had not had a large role. So it also gave me confidence and vindicated the rest of my life.
Okay, any other questions? People can also.
I considered creating a publishing company. You know, thanks. It is an interesting idea. Do you know the playwright Sheila Callahan? She's a playwright who I worked with a lot, and she just started a publishing company, which I thought was amazing. Smart, I know. But no, I haven't. We've thought, we're doing this thing now called Tiny Plays for the Time of No Plays. And we're thinking we want to publish that, and we haven't quite figured out how to do that. A few small play publishing companies have sprung up lately. I'm not sure. Yeah. One is called Three Hole Press. They're super cool. I'm trying to remember the other. But
well, I want to organize a field trip to New York when you start doing plays next year.
No, the old model is not good, Michael. I agree with you, of publishers. Yeah, I feel like Play Scripts tried to do something that would be a different model, but they published my play. So go ahead, sorry. Sorry, Jay, go ahead.
That's okay. Anyone else? I think it was the last time I saw you perform at the San Francisco Fringe Festival. It may have been.
Probably.
A super long time ago.
Yes.
We were children. Well, thank you, everyone. If there are no more questions, oh, look at that. We're right at our time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you for having me. What a fun thing to get to do.
Well, you really convey the energy and enthusiasm. I mean, you talk about why you're still going at this, because it's still getting you excited, and that's great. You know, it's not, I'm going to work. You're excited about the people you work with and the very cool, wacky theater stuff you get to do. So it makes all the challenges worthwhile. So you're in an enviable position, and I've been proud to be a long time, small but regular contributor to New George's, and I wish I could have seen more shows over the years, but I look forward to the virtual one.
Well, me too. I hope you like it.
Oh, I'll love it.
Anyway, we'll have more, so keep in touch and keep checking with us, because we have a couple other things we have.
Cool. Well, I'm on your mailing list. Yes. Yeah.
Sure.
Folks, we've sent some links. There's a website, and yeah, you will see. Now you'll see New George's pop up in the news when you're reading about theater stuff, and you'll say, I know that woman. So, all right. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right.
Hey, thanks, Sarah.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much, Susan and Jay. It was nice to meet you, Susan. I did write down God's Ears, but if you had like 3 or 4 other plays of that you would recommend us checking out that would be good examples, would you please just send those titles? Yeah. And I would love to kind of expand. One of the things that we're doing in this time of Corona is expanding our horizons. So I think that would be a wonderful thing that we'll send out to everybody who is here tonight.
Great. Oh, that's fun. That's a fun task.
Thank you. Other than that, thank you all so much.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. Thanks you for the Facebook people as well. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you virtually soon.
We'll see you virtually very soon. And just do a quick reminder that Dracula does perform on Friday and Saturday. It's going to be a delightfully spooky time.
Perfect. Have fun.
All right. Good night. Thank you.
Good night.